Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Why Write. Today's topic is critical reading and taking notes as it relates to research. Our objectives for today are to understand critical reading, to learn active reading strategies, learn the difference between primary and secondary sources, learn the difference between note taking and annotating, understand the difference between in-text citing and the works cited page. So, critical reading is active reading. Active reading is deliberate interaction with the text, words, and content. Deliberate interaction is note taking, annotating, highlighting, and summarizing. And deliberate interaction with the text is a part of those active reading strategies. Just interacting with the text through the note taking, the annotating, highlighting, and summarizing. When I teach 1301, I teach students what the reading process is. Critical reading and the reading process, they are similar in these respects, where you interact with the text. This helps to increase your comprehension, and it also activates you as an active reader. And as an active reader, you want to question, compare, and evaluate reading material. The difference between the reading process and critical reading is that I would say would be more of the questioning, not just of what's within the source, but also who produced the source, where the source came from, and so on and so forth. The most major active reading strategy for research is the CRAP test. CRAP stands for currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose to evaluate sources you find for your research. One of the first questions you need to ask is the information current and up to date? This question is relative. What do I mean by this? It just depends on your topic. Your topic may ask you to find information that's 40 plus years old so that you can prove a certain point. The next question is the information relevant to your topic? This is important too. Typically, topics are broad. So you have to begin to narrow your topic in order for you to be able to understand what's relevant and what's not. Next question, is the author qualified to write about this subject? For instance, my subject matter expertise is English. I have colleagues whose subject matter expertise is math. Neither one of us would say, hey, I can write on English, or vice versa. I can write something on math. Not unless we have some sort of experience or we're qualified to write in that area. So it's important to find out whether or not your author is qualified to write on that particular subject. You also want to see if the if the information is accurate. The internet is great for us to be able to access information. However, it's not so great when it comes to finding out whether or not the information is accurate. You have to do a deeper dive, because you can do a simple Google search of any topic, any subject at any time. You get a plethora of information, or plethora of source material returning back. However, you don't know whether or not that's accurate. For instance, you could do a simple Google search of an actor or someone that you want some information on, but the information that you get back is not always accurate, because sometimes you can get thousands of hits as to the information that's out there on that particular person. So you have to do a deeper dive to make sure that this information is accurate. That just basically means looking at comparing other sources, as I stated earlier, comparing material to understand whether or not it's accurate. Last, what's the purpose of this information? Is this information produced to persuade, to teach, to tell a story? The purpose is important because that helps you as the researcher to understand whether or not it's relevant to your topic. Here's an example. So, as I mentioned about the reading process, I was looking at some articles and I ran across this title. And for me, the title activated some prior knowledge. I've heard a lot of statistics about how pets can help to alleviate depression. This particular title caught my attention because this seems to say the opposite. The author did pass the CRAP test for me. The information is current. Not only was it published in 2019, the author did go back and he included more source material, I believe in like 2022. Also, it's relevant in terms of my curiosity. So this was relevant to me because I thought, let's see what he has to say about pet ownership and depression. In addition, he is an authority on this particular subject. He's a psychologist who studies depression. Is the information accurate? For the most part, just from first glance, it seemed very accurate. Of course, I would have to do a deeper dive. And I say it seemed very accurate because he did list multiple studies that he reviewed and he pulled the information from. Last but not least, what was the purpose? His purpose is to inform the public that pet ownership may not be what we thought it was as it relates to depression. In fact, most of the studies that he found were just studies over older people as it relates to the two variables, pet ownership and depression. So the majority of the studies didn't find a difference as it relates to this. Primary versus secondary sources. Primary sources are immediate first-hand accounts of a topic from people who had a direct connection with it. Now, for the source that we just looked at, that's considered a secondary source because information provided secondhand information and commentary from other researchers. Remember I said he pulled multiple articles and sources from multiple researchers to gather his data on this particular topic. All right, here's another source, the Great Influenza. This was an interview that I conducted. Susie Thomas was born in 1913 in a small town in Louisiana. During our interview about her mother's death, she explained, "My mother was 13 when she gave birth to me. I did not have siblings, but I had a host of cousins to keep me company. When I was 5 years old, my mother died of the flu. We called it the Great Sickness. In 1918, this flu, which was later referred to as the Great Influenza, killed many people. In my family, people were so ill that they could not even bury the dead. I could vividly remember seeing bodies covered up on the side of the road. Around 1919, we were told that this flu had spread worldwide. I am now 106, and this great sickness has returned." So this story by Susie Thomas is considered a primary source. This is her firsthand account of this particular disease, or I would say sickness, right? My grandmother also, she passed from the coronavirus in 2021. So not only did my great grandmother die from the Great Influenza, but my grandmother also passed away from the coronavirus in 2021. However, I wanted to give you this as an example of a primary source. My grandmother was a wealth of information. And so did she pass the CRAP test? Yes, she did, right? So it's current, it's relevant, especially now with the coronavirus still being very present in our world today. It's accurate, and also it is she's an authority on this in terms of her firsthand experience, which makes primary sources that much more credible when you have firsthand experience and knowledge. In addition, the purpose of this was to inform you and inform the general public of her experience as it relates to the great influenza and the coronavirus. All right, reasons for critical reading. So as I mentioned earlier, the reading process and critical reading are very similar and pretty much go hand in hand. However, critical reading is used to determine the value of reading material for your own purposes. It is also used to detect logic that is faulty on the part of the author. It's used to separate fact from opinion, and to determine whether to accept information being presented or to reject it. So again, it's a more thorough analysis of the reading, especially as it relates to the author and their position on a particular topic. So the mechanics of reading critically. This is also a part of the active reading. Reading critically requires you to take notes. You want to avoid just merely summarizing. For the most part, when you're reading critically, you want to note key people, events, terms, and dates. You want to record your responses to the text and questions that you may have. In addition, you want to annotate. Annotate requires underlining, circling, or highlighting terms. Mark where key people, groups, or events or phenomena are first described. Periodically note the main idea of a passage. So all of this is just a part of interacting with the text, not only to increase your comprehension, but to gain knowledge and understanding as to whether or not this is a source that you will use for your research. Critical reading and informed decision. So the first thing I would say is to check your assumptions. Currently, I had a student who was for a particular topic. However, after listening to others' positions and looking at some more research, his position changed. So his assumption about that particular topic was based off of what he thought about the topic at first, until the second point, the new information that he learned. So he learned new information, and then the last question is, were your assumptions true? So the student explained that some of his assumptions were true, but not all of them. Therefore, he decided to change his position. With your note taking as it relates to critical reading and research, you want to keep track of what you read. When you're reading a text just for fun or leisure, you're not always going to keep track of it. However, when you're reading for research, you want to keep track of all of the information, like recording the author's name, title, place of publication, publisher, date of publication, and so on and so forth. Why is this so important? This is important because you have to include in-text citation and a works cited page for any source material that you use within your paper. Within the note taking, even though it says don't just merely summarize, you do want to summarize main points. The point to not merely summarize basically means that you want to interact with that text more than anything, and you want to record important information to help you make an informed decision as to whether or not you can use that source. The last point I want to point out, for lack of a better term, is to ensure your notes are complete. Now, this is relative. So I say as long as you can understand your notes, they're complete. So just make sure that you yourself can understand your notes. All right, so as I mentioned before, recording this information in terms of the author, the date, the publisher, and so on and so forth, you need that information for your in-text citation because you're going to include attributions or lead-in. Basically words like furthermore, I'm sorry, basically words like the author states or the author suggests to lead into the quote, the summary, or the paraphrase that you will use within your text. Now, all of that recorded information about the particular source that you found or are using in your paper, that recorded information will now be transferred over to your works cited page. Now, this is an example of MLA in text citing and works cited page. However, this is true for any style format that you use. For example, APA, you'll still include some sort of in-text citation, and APA has a reference page where you have to list all of the sources that you use within your paper. All right, so now we're going to test your knowledge. Simply because something is published doesn't make it necessarily true. Therefore, you must question what you read. True or false? Next question or next statement. The key to reading critically lies in reading and often rereading. True or false? Next statement, last statement, is citing is not required when you take notes on source material. True or false? All right. The first one is true. As critical and active readers, we should always question the information and the author's credibility. The next one is true. Reading and rereading are essential to increasing your comprehension of the material. The last one is false. Anytime we summarize or paraphrase information from another source, we should always include in-text citations and a works cited page. Hence, my sources that are listed here. Thank you for visiting Why Write.